January 16, 1984, Aurora, Colorado. It was a cold night. Elongated shadows of houses creep into the home of the Bennett family, a warning from the house itself. Someone has broken into the home. By morning, an unthinkable horror awaited, a massacre that would haunt the community for decades. The next morning, the family's grandmother had come to visit the home. She noticed that they had not opened their furniture and was concerned by that, so she wanted to do a quick wellness check. Therefore, she was at the threshold of the house, blissfully unaware of what had happened in this house. She opened the door. However, what she found was truly disturbing. Her family had been killed like animals, and in the center of it all was the sole survivor. The Bennett's daughter, Vanessa, a poor girl surrounded by 3 other bodies. Her eyes were glazed over, lifeless like a dead fish that had fallen to the cold, bloodied floor of a fishmonger shop. There were clear signs that she had been raped. What drives a person to commit such unimaginable violence? And how did it take over 30 years to find the answers? In this video, we will go over the timeline of events, the other people who had the misfortune of meeting the culprit, the investigation that followed this man, an analysis of his actions and who he is, and trying to understand it within the context of other statistics and background information. Every story has to start somewhere, and this story starts with the Bennett parents and their meeting. Bruce Bennett was born on April 22, 1956 in Denver, Colorado. He grew up in a typical American middle-class family. 2 brothers, pool parties, sleepovers, high school. Normal stuff. He was a mostly ordinary man. However, her wife had come from a far different environment from her husband. She was surrounded by stress. The eldest of 4 siblings, she was to act as their caretaker after her mother had died, practically raising her siblings. Her father was a war veteran who was focused solely on providing for his family. He was not much help in raising his kids. Safe to say that this shaped me to be tough and resilient. However, resilience can only get you so far. She met her husband through his brother, and he would pry away the tough mask she had put up to face her challenges. He brought a sense of normalcy and comfort into her life, something that was sorely missing. Soon they were madly in love, later marrying in the 1970s. Bruce joined the Army, served through Pearl Harbor, and provided for his family. The family was happy, and the couple soon had 2 daughters. Melissa was born in 1976, and Vanessa was born in 1981. They later settled in Aurora and purchased their first home, and Bruce had chosen to leave the Army and set up a furniture store. This was his dream. This was the American dream. A loving home, a doting wife, and 2 lovely, healthy kids who surely grow up to be bright young women. Their life could have been plucked out of a magazine as being the picture-perfect example of what a good life could and should look like. Their life was perfect, and the future was bright. However, the brightest lights are stalked by the darkest shadows. Connie Bennett had come to visit her granddaughter on the night of the attack. She had been teaching her to pick out a melody on a chord organ, an instrument she bought for cheap at a thrift store. For what it's worth, it was an absolute steal. She planned to give it to her granddaughter on her birthday, but she decided to make it a surprise early gift. This was on January 16, 1984. After the attack, Connie took in her surviving granddaughter. However, after the attack, neither of them could look at the world the same way again. The night of the attack shattered the illusion of safety that was in the house. The American dream had been dashed into a million pieces, replaced by a chilling reality. The world is dangerous. Monsters are real. However, every beast leaves a trail in the mud, and every hunter knows how to track down a beast. The Bennett family was not an isolated incident. A beast feasts on human flesh. It will not stop at just one victim. Unfortunately, there were others. At the time of the murder, there had been several other murders, assaults, and robberies. January 4, 1984. A man had broken into the homes of a young couple and attacked them with a hammer. They both survived, however, they will forever be unsafe in their own home. Something as simple as turning a corner brings up memories of the violent armed man who attempted to kill them. 6 days before the murder of the Bennett family, Patricia Smith, An interior decorator had dropped off her daughter at the park and had gone home. She went to her room and turned on the TV. She went down and was attacked by a man with a hammer. She had left her garage door open and someone had broken into the home. Her daughter was left alone at the park. She tried to call her mom, but the phone wasn't picking up, so her cousin picked her up and took her to come. Something wasn't right. When they returned to the home, the garage door was still open. When they went inside, they saw it. Pants were strewn across the floor and her shirt was buttoned and thrown open. Patricia had been killed. Her body looked like an animal carcass, torn and ravaged like it was mauled by a rabid animal. She had been raped and brutally killed. 17 brutal blows to the head, signs of SA, and all the money in her purse had been stolen. Immediate investigative work. The investigation into the 1984 hammer attacks in Colorado, including the brutal murders of the Bennett family and Patricia Smith, remained unsolved for decades. Despite having genetic evidence from the bloodstains around the house and other places, the police in 1984 were yet to have access to technologies like genealogy. The case inevitably went cold due to the lack of conclusive evidence to link a suspect to the crime. The families were devastated by the lack of justice and would not stand for it. They would beg the police to pick the case back up again. There was nothing. They had already pored over all the available information and evidence, and there was nothing that they could have used. However, there was a glimmer of hope. They had collected blood samples. They didn't have the technology to use the samples for anything. The takedown. Time marches on. The drumbeat of robberies and murders continues, and a cold stiffness hangs in the air, a sinister symphony. And like a symphony, new instruments come in. Technologies, pieces of evidence, such and such. The song crescendos and the rhythm comes to a halt. Despite that, after 3 decades of begging for justice for the families, we are finally able to analyze the blood. After the police got their hands on this forensics tech, they were able to figure out who committed the crime. This led to a wave of justice in many cold cases. Among them were the Bennett family and Patricia Smith case. In 2018, the case was reopened, and after forensics analysis, we were able to find out the killer. Alex Ewing, a former convict who had already been incarcerated in Nevada for unrelated offenses. This pivotal discovery provided the necessary evidence to charge Ewing with the charges for the murder of the Colorado murders. In 2021, Ewing was convicted for the murder of the family and Patricia Smith. These charges are backed using DNA evidence that conclusively linked Ewing to the crime scenes. He was sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms. The beast, cornered and wounded, snarled and spits in defiance, but the hunters are relentless, their pursuit fueled by righteous anger. Finally, the creature falls. It bleeds, blood pooling on the floor, the body slumping under its weight. Now there is only one thing left to do: skin it, dissect it, and understand the beast for what it is. Born on August 14th, 1960, you may be tempted to assume that at one point he was innocent. However, Ewing was always a bad apple. He has been getting into trouble, fighting with other people, and getting into trouble. Before his violent murder spree in Colorado, Ewing was convicted of several crimes, including burglaries in Florida, California, and Arizona in 1979, and multiple other burglaries leading up to the Colorado violence spree. He was a robber. That was what he did: break into homes without a plan. If he ran into anyone, he would beat or kill them till they couldn't fight back. And if he ran into a woman, he would sexually assault her, and then beat her within an inch of her life. Little else is known about Ewing's personal life. However, after his brutal murders of the Bennett family, shortly after the murders on the 27th of January 1984, he was arrested for one of the other break-ins that he had committed. He had broken into a man's home, beaten him within an inch of his life using a rock, and stolen all the money he had. However, on August 9th of that year, he had broken out of jail. Later that night, he had broken into a home in Henderson, Nevada, and violently assaulted a couple with an axe handle. He was apprehended and convicted for these crimes. His criminal activity reflects a pattern of escalating violence, culminating in the acts which occurred in Colorado. During his trial, he maintained his innocence, proclaiming that the system was rigged. This man is a monster. Plain and simple, not only did he kill an entire family, he sexually assaulted multiple women, and like a monster, he did not stop at women. His violent and evil mind made him lay his hands on an innocent child. And despite that, he had the nerve to claim himself innocent. What was his mothering, and how can he justify this to himself? Every crime has a motive. Determining the exact motive behind Alex Ewing's brutal attacks in 1984 is challenging. He consistently maintained his innocence, meaning that he refused to disclose his motivations, making it highly difficult to figure out his specific intentions and motivations for the crimes he committed. Maybe it was insane, or maybe it was a crime of opportunity. As of now, we don't have access to any of the investigative reports on the crime, and there is a limited amount of information being shared in press releases. However, some criminologists and investigators suggest that his actions may have been driven by a combination of factors, possible psychological disorders, and opportunistic tendencies. This means that the house wasn't properly secured and simply walked inside. From there, he could have gone into a psychosis of sorts and killed the families. Despite all this, I think I have an idea as to why he committed the crimes that he did. He has always had a history of committing break-ins and stealing from people. My theory is that he broke into the Bennett house, intending to steal, however ended up either running into someone awake or waking one of the house's residents, which then resulted in the murders. This is also something that I think, because as someone who escaped from the law in 1979, he would be someone who wouldn't be able to get money through any legal means such as working a job, meaning that he would eventually get desperate enough to once again start robbing people. This resulted in him robbing and burglarizing many homes. However, these burglaries were likely not attributed to him. However, whenever he would get caught or confronted by someone during these burglaries, he would get violent. Because of this, I think that Alex's motive was that he was desperate and was stealing to get by, eventually culminating in his murder of the Bennett family. As heinous as Alex's crimes are, I think there is one simple takeaway from this story. You should always be aware to lock your doors at night, close things tight, and make sure that any ways for robbers to get into your home are sealed. As we could see with the Collardo murders, Alex was able to get into all of these homes because of the poor foresight of the home's owners who mistakenly left entrances into the home. According to the FBI's Uniform Crime Reporting Program, roughly half of all burglaries involve forcible entry. This means that even if it is a simple action, closing your doors and making sure that they are locked halves your chances of burglaries, and it can make it so that the evidence and risk of a break-in might outweigh the loot that burglaries get from the house, making it so that they don't want to break into the house. Another thing that you can do is install home security systems and cameras so that even when uninvited guests show up, you have evidence to point police in their direction. The Bennett family tragedy reminds us of the darkness that can hide in plain sight. While justice was served, the scars of these crimes linger, a sobering reminder of both human evil and the relentless pursuit of truth. Advancements in DNA technology eventually led to a breakthrough in 2018, identifying Alex Ewing as the perpetrator of these heinous crimes. Ewing, who was already serving a sentence for a separate violent crime, was extradited to Colorado to face charges. In 2021, he was convicted for the murders of the Bennett family and subsequently sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms. The following year, he was also convicted for the murder of Patricia Smith, receiving an additional life sentence. Stories like these show the importance of never giving up on justice, no matter how cold the trail may seem. What other mysteries might we solve with the tools of tomorrow?